Hi, everybody. Just going to give everyone a couple of seconds just to join the webinar. Just see the numbers trickling in. Hopefully, everyone will just join us in a second and we can get on with the actual webinar. Right, hello, everybody. My name's Chris Sams. I'm the Director of Membership and International at BPI, and one of the things that I look after is the Music Export Growth Scheme. And the idea of today's webinar is to give you a bit of a run through the scheme, some tips on applications, and some do's and don'ts to help you hopefully all have a really successful application. Um, and my slides are frozen. There we go. So obviously the first thing is, what is MEGS? MEGS is a government investment scheme to promote UK artists and and boost overseas music exports. It was funded by the Department for Business and Trade and the Department for Culture, Media and Sport. It's managed by the BPI. Obviously, that's where I come in, and it's just important to say that we take no money out of the scheme whatsoever. It's been around for about 10 years. We've given over £5 million granted to 330 acts across all genres. And it's important to say that it's a matched funding initiative. So you need to put in 50% of all the match funding, but I'll come on to that in a moment. And obviously, it's a grant. There's no need to repay. Depending on how successful you are, there's nothing along those lines. If you're massively successful, you don't have to repay anything. So really quickly, I'm just going to run through the scheme, a bit about eligibility and how you apply, etc., etc. If you've got any questions, please use the Q&A tab, as I'll be able to see them and respond to them. I will probably take questions right at the end, though, as there's lots of information I give here that may already be covered in some of the questions that you're asking. So, who is eligible? It's basically any UK-based small to medium enterprise. The definition's on the screen there. So that could be labels, it could be artists themselves, it could be managers, publishing companies, tour agents and promoters, etc., etc., etc. The only obviously caveat is that you have to be based in the UK. Your artist can be based overseas or can doesn't have to be a British national, but obviously the board does like the applicants to be based in the UK. And it's open to all, but obviously, roughly about 95% of all the funding has been given to artists that are signed to indie labels. How do you apply? We normally tell everyone when the rounds are open. The details are always on our website, bpi.co.uk, and there is a link on the website there to the MEGS page, where obviously you can see lots of information about the scheme. And it does obviously say here that it's an online application process, and the form is only open when the round is live. So obviously, you can't see the application portal as and when the rounds aren't open. But obviously, there's one open at the moment. It closes on December 4th. So, obviously you can see the questions through that link that's on the BPI website. How's the decision reached? Initially, there is a sift by myself and Phil Patterson from the Department for Business and Trade. And all we do there is we get rid of the ineligible applications. So they are applications that are not eligible. So things like when people ask for funding for a UK tour, or to say just to go to South by Southwest, for example. And there are a couple of things that are ineligible, but I'll come on to eligibility in a minute. The Once that sift is done, then we send all the board papers to the MEGS board, and it's 25. It's made up of a long list of 25 music industry execs, chaired by John Kennedy, and that's John Kennedy, the music lawyer, not John Kennedy, the radio ex-DJ. So please don't hassle poor old John on the radio. It's nothing to do with him. And we have some industry trade association observers, and it's important to say that all applications considered. We obviously send the applications that are put through to the board, but we also send the ineligible ones. So if any of the board members think that for whatever reason we've got that decision wrong, they can have it overturned and obviously put into the mix. And obviously, it's important to say that the Music Export Growth Scheme, the likelihood of you succeeding and the business case is really taken into consideration. And so obviously we want to see applications where a solid business case is made. So unlike some other funding that may be along more arts council based, where it's about keeping types of music alive or getting to new audiences, this really is about the business case and the likelihood of this succeeding. And the return on investment since 2014 is, I think, something like £13.61 for every pound worth of government funding that's been given. And it's also very, very competitive. Many of you probably on this webinar have had applications that have been unsuccessful. And just to note to say there, the last round was £500,000 worth of funding, but we had, at least sort of 6, 7 times worth the amount of applications. And this round obviously is quite different, but I'm still seeing there's probably going to be a lot of application. And obviously, it's important to say that there's a diverse range of genres and backgrounds of applicants are all funded. And we don't have any quotas of regionality or types of music, etc., etc. It's all done a decision on merit. And important to say, just again, 95% of the acts are signed to indie labels. But if you're a manager and you manage an artist that's signed to a major label, that doesn't preclude you from receiving money. And John, who's the chairman of the board, John Kennedy, his mantra is, would I fund it if it was on my label? So obviously the board are making decisions with taxpayers' money, but also always having their mindset, if it was their money, would they still fund it? So what are we looking to fund? We're looking to fund overseas music-based projects where the scheme can add value and make a difference. So that can cover things like digital and marketing, press PR and promotion, old-fashioned tour support, including costs of session musicians, tour managers, travels, accommodation, etc., etc. We're saying here, be creative and innovative. There's lots and lots of applications that look very, very similar, and obviously we have a board who are rummaging through, 100, 150 applications. There's a lot of them that are for the same venues in the States with the same tour agent, with the same PR person, with the same marketing plan, etc., etc. So anything that is creative and innovative is always looked upon very, very favorably by the board. And obviously, just to mention again, we cannot fund solely international showcases. So if you have an artist that's appearing at South by Southwest, for example, next year, and only South by Southwest, then you need to speak to our colleagues at the PRS for Music Foundation and their amazing International Showcase Fund. But obviously, if you are playing South by Southwest, for example, and then playing several other dates in the US, then of course you can apply for MEGS. But obviously, be aware we do talk to the ISF guys quite a lot, and Phil Patterson from DBT obviously works on the MEGS scheme alongside me. He also sits on the ISF board. So as a general rule of thumb, if it's just a showcase, it's the ISF and PRS Foundation. And if it's, a showcase and something extra, then obviously you can come to MEGS. So I'm going to give you a few tips on applications here. And these are, amended all slightly after sort of 10 years of running the scheme. But, they're as prevalent and as important as they were on the first round of applications as they are going into the 22nd round. Excuse me. We always say put it all on the application form. So what that means is please do not think that anyone on the board has any information about your band or knows anything about you as a management company or a label, etc., etc. So you need to write it as if you are talking to a complete stranger. And that's obviously, don't assume that everyone knows who you are, knows who the band is, knows whatever else is, because you'll be amazed that some people don't. So we always ask you to please put it all on the application form. We want to give accurate details. Initially when we asked for sales data, the BPI co-owns the UK charts with ERA, so we can instantly check, what sales data is. We also know, the costs of everything like flights, hotels, and we know how much visas cost. So we want you to give accurate details. And obviously, when it comes to the end few questions, when we're asking what do you think the returns will be, we obviously know the kind of returns that we expect to see from, sync, etc., etc. So please give accurate details wherever possible. We want you to give correct figures if you can, or if not, please estimate. But obviously, please, bear in mind that, they need to be very, very accurate. We're always looking for acts on a tipping point. So what does that mean? It means an act, that's doing well in the UK and has some, movement in the UK, have played, various venues, probably festivals. And they're also now starting to get, traction in international markets. So they're looking that they've got agents, they've got management team, they've got a label, all working together to help them, work internationally. So it's not really a scheme for debut releases. Again, there are plenty of other organizations that fund that, our friends at PRS Foundation again, but also, some of the regional arts councils, if you're in, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, can help with, early stage funding. So we're looking for acts that may be a little bit more down the career path than just an initial release. And as I mentioned just quickly there, we want to see that you've got some traction in the target market. So you've either got, sales history there, your streams are showing you that you've got an audience there, or you maybe have dipped your toes, you've gone and played, say, a showcase festival in that market. We want to see that, once we give you some funding to go over there and have a tour, that there'll be, a really good level of fan engagement with you because you've already done that initial work in that target market. We like you to split costs by territory. The reason we ask you to do this, excuse me, is obviously sometimes at the end of the day, in our board meeting, where we've had a hotly contested couple of hours, where the board members are trying to give, as many acts as possible some funding. We obviously don't have money to fund everyone. So sometimes if you split the cost by territory, so say, for example, you do a tour that's, I don't know, say Germany, France, and the Netherlands, and they're going to cost roughly about £10,000 each through those three territories. What you would suggest you do is you put the budget for the Netherlands, budget for France, and the budget for Germany in there, so that if, for example, the board only had £10,000 left, they could say to you, well, here's £10,000, we'd like you to do Germany, or here's £10,000, you'd like to do one of the territories instead of the other. If you're doing, a multi-territory tour and things like, your flights and visas, for example, or even, tour manager things can't be split by territory, then just make a note of that in the budget section so we're aware of that. Obviously, it only helps when, we want to split costs at the end of the day and give people less money than they asked for. But obviously, hopefully we try and give you as much as we can. So it's always a good idea to show, the differences in each territory and the costs. We like to say follow a logical plan. So that is, if you've never played the USA before, never even done any marketing over there, but you've done lots in Europe, we'd want to see that you'd probably come for funding in Europe before you went to the States. And obviously, we know that on your first trip around the US, for example, you're not going to be selling out, 5,000 venues. So we'd be surprised if we saw an application for a debut tour that said that. So we want to see that some thoughts being put in to logical career development within that, within your plan. So we want to see again, that if you're playing Europe, you play sort of smaller venues first, etc., and that there's a good level of, logical thought put into why you'd like this plan to work. Throwback to my school days, this one, we always ask you if you can answer the questions. We ask you 18 or 19 questions. They all have different answers that we're looking for. So if you find yourself repeating information, please go back and have a look at the questions. We ask you some questions specifically to try and get answers that the board are able to use. So please, again, answer the questions that we've asked you. We do have word counts in some of the sections, so please be aware of that, as you physically won't be allowed to type in anything else. And obviously, again, a reminder, please don't assume that we know anything or anyone about your application. So again, you need to answer the questions that are there. This is more for applications where you've maybe not been successful the first time. We always try and give you some feedback, and obviously we try and give you that based on what the board have told us. So please bear that in mind when you receive it. And the board may have given you specific instructions that they say to you, "Oh, we'd like to see more effort put into X, Y, or Z." They might say a different territory. But obviously, this is coming from a place where they want you to have a successful application the next time round. I didn't mention at the start, we have got funding for the next couple of years on MEGS, so there will be at least 4 rounds, in the next 2 years. So again, if you're unsuccessful on this round and the board give you some advice for the next round, take that advice on board when you're preparing your next application. So yeah, just a little bit of a summary there. I mean, obviously, we say, put all the information on the form, don't assume we know anything. And obviously, again, to make imperative to you, you need to state a clear business case for why this application should be funded. Can't attach your documents apart from, a bio, so obviously, if you do attach a bio, please make sure it's a bio because anything else won't be read. And obviously, as we say at the end there, we can give you feedback and act accordingly. So I will always endeavour where possible to give you feedback on applications. And obviously, as I know that we have funding for the next sort of 2 years, we will do that quite readily and speak to you about, how your applications, have gone. Um, a little bit on Meg stats here, just to obviously say, it's £13 for every pound invested. So we are looking for acts that stand a good chance of being, of being successful. And obviously, I think some of the figures on the other side here, the 4.5 million needs updating. I think we're up to about £62 million financial returns from applicants on the scheme over 10 years, which I think you'll agree is quite, an interesting and very, very good return on investment for the UK government and taxpayers. So just a little bit about on round 22 onwards, because obviously that's the round we're in at the moment. You know, the round closes in December 4th, and the submission dates for 24-25 have not been confirmed yet, but they roughly will be around sort of round 23 in April, round 24 probably will be sort of August, and then 25 will probably be September, October, but we will confirm that as soon as we can. We have £1.6 million per year for 2 years. So obviously we've got £1.6 million for this financial year and £1.6 million for obviously, as a caveat on that, the money must be claimed in arrears, excuse me, by the end of each financial year. So obviously, this round that's upcoming, any of the money awarded needs to be claimed in arrears by the end of this financial year, which is March 31st, 2024. And obviously, we work with any successful applicants to make sure that's done. But obviously, it's important to say, you can pre-buy tour elements. So if your tour starts after March 31st, you can prepay your flights. You can prepay your tour manager, for example. We also like to, tell people that you can utilize digital asset creations if you want to make some, marketing assets for the tour or whatever activity it is, do that in this financial year. And obviously, we want to, make everyone aware that, we want a big emphasis on marketing and promo as well as touring. And just that line at the bottom there, as you may have seen, obviously we've got, a lot more money into MEGS for the next couple of years, but there will be no lowering of standards of successful applicants. So obviously the board have, very high standards for the applications that they see, and what they will do is keep those standards, the same over the next couple of years. And obviously, anyone that gets funded in these couple of years would have received funding in previous rounds for the want of, more financial clout awarded from the government. But obviously important to say there, we're not just suddenly going to start giving everybody money who applies. So you still need to do a very, very good application before you receive funding. That's it, really. That's a very, very quick run through. My details are there at the bottom. It's chris.times at bpi.co.uk. I'll stop sharing my screen now. So I'll see there's a few questions. So if I go onto this Q&A tab, Gaynor, can you send the slides? Yes, I can do that. That's not a problem, Gaynor. And obviously, can individual apply from Sam? Yes, obviously, individuals can apply if you are a sole trader. That's not a problem. What you cannot be, though, is any bigger than SME. So obviously, the definition of an SME, I think it's turnover of whatever millions it was. So you can apply as a sole trader, you can apply as the artist, you can apply as a manager, you can apply as any entity as long as you're based in the UK. So that's how we get around that. From Leslie, would a South by Showcase put on by promoter for multiple artists be eligible for funding, as opposed to an artist getting a treasure? Yeah, that's fine, Leslie. Obviously, as I mentioned before, if it's solely for a South by Southwest showcase, you need to speak to our friends at PRS Foundation. But obviously, if your South by Southwest showcase is part of more activity, say a larger tour of, say, 3 to 4 dates on top of a South by Southwest show, then yes, that's not a problem. We can fund that. But obviously, if it's solely that South by Southwest application, then you need to go to the PRS Foundation for their International Showcase Fund. And from Andy, you've got how far in future does a US tour need to be from submission day, and do tour dates need all to be confirmed at that point? Obviously, it means we can't fund anything before the closing date for the application. So obviously, this one is December 4th is a closing date. So your tour needs, or the activity we fund needs to start on the 5th of December onwards, and can carry on for probably up to the middle of next summer. You don't have to have everything confirmed, but obviously we want to see that, there is the ambition to have these confirmed as soon as possible. We obviously understand and appreciate that not all dates are, are confirmed so far in advance, but obviously, we need to make sure that these are done before we do that. And Laura, I think I've obviously answered your touring to be confirmed. Obviously, their receipts. How is this measured? If the money is spent slightly different to plan, is that an issue? It depends how different it is, Laura. Obviously, as what I do is as soon as you are confirmed to receive funding, we send you the methodology to and the claim forms and walkthroughs. Um, Essentially, if something is mentioned in your application, you can normally receive funding for it. It's when you add things that weren't mentioned in the application that we have a problem with. But obviously, we can always go to DBT and DCMS and see if they'll allow it. And obviously, John, as the chairman, has final say. And it just says, are there any territories outside the UK that are excluded, not worth including? Um, I think we've pretty much funded tours to the vast majority of territories in the world, apart from places like Iran, Iraq, North Korea, and Syria. So what we would always say is if there is a clear business case for any territory, doesn't matter on the side, as long as you can make a clear business case that will give good returns, I would include any territory. And it's important for anyone to understand that we do have a few Irish managers that apply. Obviously, the Republic of Ireland is outside of the UK, so you can apply for a Republic of Ireland tour. So quite a few managers from the Republic of Ireland have done that in the past. So Dave here saying when you say money must be claimed in arrears, do the artists incur the cost and then claim the money back from MEGS or the funding provided up front? No, the what we have to have is the receipts need to be sent to us or the invoices. Then we will pay on that. We work obviously with every applicant to make sure that the cash flow is as quick as possible. And there's various different ways we do that, but in essence you need to have an invoice that relates to the amount that you're claiming, and then we work with you as much as possible to get that cash flow going. But unfortunately, the government only allow us to claim this in arrears, so that's that. But as I say, obviously, we will work with you, as much as possible to work on that. I think Shadow, you just asked, what exactly meant by payment arrears. It's just what I've explained, really. You have to send us either invoices or receipts for the money, and we pay you based on that. Um, how does the match funding work? So Kieran, so literally on the section where it asks you for the budget, you put an amount in there minus any receipts on live, sorry, ticket receipts on live, then that amount, say for example, if it comes to £50,000, you are allowed to claim up to 50% of that, so it'll be £25,000 you can claim on that example. And the way it works in practical terms is when we send you the claim forms, you put in the receipts, and basically it works out 50% of all the receipts, and you can claim that. But again, we work with you as much as possible on the finance side to ensure that that's how it happens. Are previous successful applicants eligible? Yes, they are. Obviously, we have applicants that come back, for a second and sometimes even third time. We obviously want to see that, if you've had money from the scheme before, the first question that's always asked, is what was your reporting like? For those of you that aren't aware, if you get given funding, you have to do, I think it's 5 or 6 reports over 2 years. The first question the board always asks on any previous recipient is, how good is their reporting? And if they deem that the reporting wasn't good enough, they immediately do not want to give you more money. Very rarely happens that is eligible though. You are eligible for more money. Obviously, what they want to see is that if you are looking for funding, that the plan that you submit for this subsequent lot of funding is at a higher level and probably more ambitious than previous things. I think our record is 3. I can't think we've got any artist that's got more than 3 lots of funding. But again, what they've done is they've come to us at maybe an early stage of their career and asked for funding. They've then had a second lot and then come back, a much higher level for the third lot. I don't think anyone's had more than 3, but I've learned to never say never in this game. Um, if the management companies apply for their artists, do they get the money or just straight to the label? The money goes to the applicant. So if you are the management company applying, you are the person that signs a contract on behalf of the artist. So you are the person that all the finance is done with, and obviously that means that you're obviously there to do all the reporting as well. Now, obviously, we always want the applicant to be somebody who can, act on behalf of the artist. It could be the artists themselves if they want. It could be the management. It could be the label. It could be anyone who is obviously UK based. Mostly at the moment, I think it's roughly about 50-50 between labels and management companies about who is the applicant. But obviously, it's important to say, it goes to the applicant who puts the application in and then subsequently signs the contracts and then obviously does the financial claims. Do you fund independent labels for cost towards artist promotional activities overseas, or is it direct to an artist? As I just explained, it goes to the applicant. So obviously, if you as a label, an independent label, have an artist you want funding for tours and international marketing activity, you put the application in, and obviously, if you are successful, you are the company that we have the relationship with, the contractual agreement with. So you will be the ones receiving the money. Can we repeat deadlines for submission? Yes, of course. The rounds are open now. It closes at 11:59 p.m. on the 4th of December. And obviously you cannot submit after that date. We will have deadlines for 24, 25, and I say roughly they are April, August, and I think September, October next year. But I will confirm that as soon as I can. We're just waiting on the government to confirm those dates. Is it funding for songwriters as well as artists? Yes, we can fund songwriters. That's not a problem. We tend to use artist or label or overseas activity as a general catch-all term. But obviously, we have funded songwriting camps in the past. We've had a couple of really successful applications for songwriters to attend songwriting camps. But obviously, it's important to say, it obviously needs to be for international activity. Yes, so we can fund songwriters as well as artists. What you might want to do, Charlotte, is maybe just drop me a line for me to give you some little tips about how we make sure that your songwriting application is well received by the boards if you want to do that. Um, are you able to allocate an amount in the budget as payment for yourself? It depends who the yourself is. If you are a manager, you can put in there a management fee. Obviously, due to government funding rules, we cannot pay wages for the artist themselves. It's obviously due to government grant rules. And I think obviously if you pay wages, it then becomes into things like Department for Work and Pension. So it's muddies the water somewhat. So obviously you can, if you're a manager, put in a management fee and that can be part of the cost. That's not a problem. But obviously what we cannot do is pay salaries and day-to-day running costs of the artists themselves because that is not allowed under the scheme. I can't seem to allow location on the website. If you go to bpi.co.uk, you will see there is a drop down top thing that says MEGS. The application thing is in there. It's on the top of the form. It says please make an application here. Anthony, if you want to email me, I'll send you a link to it because I don't have your email address to hand. So if you can send me an email with it on my email, obviously it's just chris.tams@bpi.co.uk. Andy, did you say next time is April 24th? Yes, it should be opening as close to April 1st as we can. We are obviously waiting for the government just to confirm the dates on that, but we can sort that out. Can we challenge number 4 as a model that proves it's possible to sell out venues for a new artist from a standing start with no streaming presence? You mean not having any traction in a target market? If you can put on an application how you do that, then I'm sure the board will take that on due consideration. Obviously, they look at lots of different metrics, not just sales. They look at how your social media and fan interaction works across many metrics. So if you want to put an application in that explains how you can do that, then I'm sure the board will be all ears and I'm sure we'll be very interested to have a look at what that model is. So please just do that. Can I fully claim by March 24th? We have an album launch campaign which goes in Jan to May. We have to claim April to spend May. Able to make spend before March. Yes, unfortunately, you do. This is one of the peculiarities with government funding is the purchase order for MEGS for 23-24, even though they only gave the approval a few weeks ago, has to be spent before and has to be returned by March 31st next year, because unfortunately there's no money allowed out on the scheme after that in this current tranche. So obviously, as I mentioned earlier, if you are successful in funding, we will come to you and work out the best way to get you this money out as quickly as we can. Obviously, it has to be based in arrears, etc., etc., etc. Do the artists have to be based in the UK, or is it enough their management company is? The board, obviously, the rules are that the applicant has to be based in the UK. The board tends to favour applications that are for artists based in the UK, or at least they can prove that the majority of the money that is given and sorry, the majority of the money that will be as a result of the funding. So things like receipts, sales, etc., comes through the UK. The board always really, really want to see that. Although there are no rules in place about where the artist is based, you don't have to be a UK national. As I mentioned at the start, we've had a couple of artists who are not UK nationals who've received funding. So obviously the board do prefer though that the artist is based. But if you can prove that, say, their profit and loss accounts, etc., are all run via the UK, then the board tend to be fine on that. Um, Can you apply to go and work with musicians, producers, and artists in your chosen country to produce an album as well as showcases? Sort of. It's a really difficult one, that one, Vanessa. There are obviously schemes that are run by people like the British Council that run excellent schemes. They run a thing called Artists in Residence, which you might want to look at, which obviously is specifically for that. It really depends what the work is and what the kind of level of funding you're requesting for is this. And obviously, you mentioned as well as showcases. Obviously, just need to repeat, it's not particularly for showcases, Megs. It's really for tours and marketing activity. But obviously, you can include showcases if it is part of a wider tour. So again, you might just want to check on that little bit, producing the album with the British Council on their Artists in Residence, which is a fabulous scheme that the British Council have been running for years. So you might want to check on that one. But we sort of can, but I probably wouldn't make it the big part of your application. From JC, can you include management travel costs as part of the application? Yes, of course you can. Essentially, as I mentioned, the other things you can't really claim for are the day-to-day wages of the artists themselves. But things like travel, for band, for crew, for managers, for front of house technicians, for lighting guys, etc., etc. They can all be put in. That's not a problem. And obviously, when you get, the applications, when you get the sort of go ahead for an application, again, we mentioned to exactly what you can put, what you can't. And I say outside of sort of those day-to-day wages for an artist, you pretty much can put most things in that relate to an overseas application. Looking for Meg's tour. Some costs will be during the tour as you travel. If we haven't toured there before, we have to estimate this. What I would say is obviously, is yes, you may need to estimate them. If the actual cost turn out to be much higher or lower than the price of the application, we obviously, if they're much higher, there's probably not much we can do about that, unfortunately. And if they're much lower, what we would say if there are other parts of your application, say you put in, marketing spend as part of your application, we would then say, well, you can spend, extra money on that. We don't keep you completely to the budget you put in. So, say for example, you put in £5,000 for flights and £5,000 for marketing, and your marketing ended up costing six and your flights four, then that wouldn't be a problem. But obviously, what you couldn't then do is put in 4 grand for merchandise, because obviously you haven't mentioned that in your application. So that's why we like you to do that. We'd like to apply for Japan, writing and recording over there as well as shooting a video. Yeah, that's sort of seems to be fine, Charlotte. As I say, you probably might just drop me a line on an email. We can chat through that. It's probably a best way to do that one. Um, is purchase of capital assets, i.e., backline to use and store in the USA, eligible or hired non-capital costs? You can. purchase assets like Backline to use and store in the USA, as long as the cost is on a level that would be similar to rental or not too much. So obviously, if your rental was 4 grand and to buy it was something like 5, that would be fine. It's when it's 25 to buy it and only 5 to hire that there'd be a problem on that. But you can obviously do that. I think we've had somebody do it before and buy Backline that they then stored, which obviously was fine for as far as the application went. You mentioned that fund allocation for regions differ off the top of your head. Is it possible because a ballpark for what around allocation which major region? Yeah, it's no surprise to say that the USA is by far our biggest funded market, being the biggest being the biggest music market in the world. I think France and Germany are the two that come straight after it, but again, not unimaginable given their closeness to the UK and obviously their relative size of markets. Lots and lots of applications in the past sort of 5 years have started to be for Southeast Asia. We've seen some for South America and some for Australasia. I think obviously the thing to be aware of is we want to see that there's a traction in these markets or that you've actually got some possibility of making money on these. It's not just a sort of way for you to go and see the world and try out these tours. The board want to see that there are good business reasons why you are touring these markets, and obviously they'll fund these. As I say, apart from a few territories globally, we've pretty much funded most major media markets in the world. Could the money be allocated towards activities such as paying a video person to film a tour and BTS in order to create a documentary of the tour experience for the fans? Yeah, that's not a problem. Yeah, we allow sort of asset creation on tour. That's not a problem. You can certainly do that. Obviously, BTS means behind the scenes. There, you're not hiring BTS the band. I think you probably. I don't think we could probably afford that. But yeah, obviously you can do that. Digital asset creation monitor is not a problem at all. Where is the recording of this webinar kept? In the cloud at the moment, but I will send it out to all of you that have attended, and that's not a problem. We'll send you that out as soon as it downloads later this afternoon. Are there successful application examples of business cases or marketing plans available? Unfortunately, not. Obviously, as you can understand, lots of confidential information is put on the application, so we can't give detail things. But obviously, if you want to contact me to discuss something you may have that you want to put on an application, please do so, and we'll try and get back to you as soon as possible. Can you apply for funding to cover both marketing and promo and tour support, or recommend to do one or the other? We actually wanted to do all of them, very much so, unless it's been covered by a third party. So, say for example, you had a label that were doing your marketing and promo for you, then we'd want you to see that all parts of this are put in. So obviously, when you do your marketing plan for the tour or whatever it is, we want to see that there is lots of promo and marketing in there. Whether or not the MEGS scheme actually funds it is neither here nor there. We want to obviously see that it's in there, but obviously we can fund both marketing, promo, and tour support. So that. If we apply by December 4th, when will we know if it's approved? You will know in the sort of second week of January. There is a board meeting in January. What happens then is the government asks us to do a little bit of due diligence on every one of the applications. So we do things like, we check the applicants at Companies House, we check who people are, who they say they are. We obviously, look at the artist to see that, they're still going, etc., etc., etc. Once that due diligence is done, we let everyone know. I would estimate it's roughly going to be around the sort of 15th of January, something along those lines. What has been a successful application for any countries in Africa? Can you provide examples of what being covered for a UK company going to spend to Africa for the first time? Yeah, we've had several tours of Nigeria, Ghana, a few for South Africa. What has been covered? Obviously, the actual physically getting people there, so flights, accommodation, visas, etc., etc. Marketing costs, promo teams, etc., etc. What has been covered? You again? Yeah, I think literally just on that, obviously the actual application went through, or I think the 4 or 5 we've done for those territories have all been for going to attend the showcase and then obviously doing tours around it. So that obviously a lot of promo marketing on top of the actual tour support, etc., was done there. Do you fund independent local costs towards art and promotional activities overseas? Yes. Or is it only direct to artists? If yes, can it be towards another artist campaigns or just one specific artist? We like you when you do an application for it to be for one or a max of two artists. And obviously, if it's two artists, if you've got two acts from the same label that are doing the same tour, and you want to save a bit on costs, you can put in an application for two artists. But obviously, what we say is that each artist is judged on a set of criteria. So, if one is, very, very good, has lots and lots of traction, and one doesn't, the application may not get approved because the second artist with a lower sort of threshold for success made it negated. So what I would say is you need it to be for one or a max of two artists. We have funded. I think we funded two metal bands, Black Moth and Antlered Man, did a co-headlining tour which we funded. Um, but obviously, you want to see that both artists would be successful. If management apply for an artist, do they get the money and continue the claim files? Does this label do this? No. If you are the applicant, you get the money. That's how it works. I missed the answer on match funding. Can you briefly explain what this can be, Alison? Yeah. So obviously, if you put in your budget that the total costs for your tour or activity and obviously minus any ticket revenue is £100,000. That means you can only claim up to 50% of that total in the scheme. So in that example, it would be £50,000. Hope that's cleared it up for you. If the submission is based on record marketing, would you consider offsetting anticipated stream and CMO related revenues in match funding? No, we don't do that. That you would need to put that information in I think it's question 18. When you answer, what the potential returns would be. That's where you'd put that. The reason, obviously, why we have to offset ticket revenues is, that is very much, an instant thing that the government don't allow us to put on. Is obviously if you're going overseas, I'm going to make £2 million on ticket sales. They're not going to give you £10,000 if obviously it's going to cost you 8,000 to go out there, and you're going to make £2 million in ticket sales. So that's why the government make us do that. So that really is just on that whole thing. If you've got things like anticipated streaming, you will be able to put that in section 18. And that will work out how we do that. Does a management company need to be a limited company? No, not at all. Just if you're based in the UK, we can do sole traders, self-employed. That's not a problem at all. And somebody's again has asked, will fund be up to songwriters? Yeah, we already answered that one. We could do songwriters. Songwriting camps, not a problem to do that. Do you cover 50% of gross costs excluding VAT? Yes, obviously, if it's international, lots of times you don't pay VAT, so you put local sales tax on that. But yes, we cover 50% of gross costs. Does it look better or have a better chance of being accepted if the artist team applies for the artist? No, really doesn't make any difference. It's obviously they want to just see a good application, whether it's the artists themselves, whether it's their manager, whether it's their label. That sort of has a little bit of sway, but not much. But actually, the board are quite open to seeing artists' applications. Obviously, I would say that whoever puts the application in needs to have access to all the information that's there. So, if you put an application in and say, oh, we don't know our sales figures, the label has them, the board tend to look unfavorably on that. So they want to see that, if you do put an application in as the artist, that you're able to answer all the questions to the best of your ability. And obviously, if you need third parties such as labels or management, etc., to fill certain sections in, it's always good to see that it's a collaborative application. But yeah, obviously, there's no real difference between who applies. We just want to see there's a good application from somebody that's able to give all the details. Would you briefly explain a successful notable case in the past, just to get an overview of the process start to finish? Well, it's quite difficult to really sort of give one of these really. I think obviously what the board are looking for is, an artist or an act that's got, a good level of, groundwork in the UK. They've probably got a manager, they've got a label, they've gigged around the UK, they've probably played festivals, they've got, a really good publisher on board, they've got a good successful team. Obviously, with the international work, they've got a team overseas, so they may have a tour agent that covers the territory for them. They have, label support, be it either from the UK or from a local label. They've got, a manager that knows how to work internationally, or even, things like publisher or sub-publisher in that destination. They want to see that, it's a tour that makes sense. So obviously, there's no point in artists going and playing 5,000 capacity venues if they've never played overseas before. They want to see that you're playing venues that are consistent with the level of, um, comparative ability over in that territory. They want to see that there's marketing and promo around it. You may have either a promotion team based there or a UK one that acts internationally for you. They want to see that, whilst you're on tour, you're making advantage of being able to visit, local DSPs, you're able to do, maybe showcasing for sync performances, that you're actually using your time, wisely while you're there, that you've got, media interviews lined up, etc., that, you've rallied your social media followers in these territories, you're doing possibly some marketing that's based around, localized marketing. And that's really sort of what we say on this one. There's quite a lot of really good notable cases that I think people have reported on in the press. I'm hard sort of pressed to give you an example one, but as I say, there's some that have done really, really well on the scheme. Lots and lots of acts that have been successful, have done, really good applications, which have really highlighted the business case for why, save for a short little bit of initial funding, they would make, really good returns on an international activity. What's my email address again? It was on screen briefly. I didn't get it. It's just chris.tams@bpi.co.uk. Although if you go on to the BPI website, there is the music export scheme at bpi.co.uk email address. Please just email that, or you can email me through university if you want. I'll pick it up through that. Does the applicant need to be a BPI member? No, you don't. Be a great recruiter tool for us if they did. No, you don't have to be a BPI member at all. Obviously, you can be, anyone. You can be the artist, you can be a manager, you can be a label, etc., etc. You just have to be based in the UK to be the applicant. Um, Not sure how I understand how the money has to be claimed by March 31st, but the term is summer 2024. But the finalists for summer 24 won't be finalised till later in the year. Right, so if you have a tour that is after the 31st of March, and your tour is in the summer, we obviously have rounds in April, etc., etc., etc. But if you are funded for activity in this round and your tour is after March 31st, then things like, you will be buying your flights before March 31st. You will be pre-booking things like your splitter van, for example. You may have, visa application fees. You have prepaid hotels. You maybe pay your tour manager up front, your session musicians up front, etc., etc. So obviously what we can't cover if you are on tour after that March 31st is things like per diems, things that actually you won't spend, or expenses while you're on tour. So obviously, if you are in that situation where you want to, apply for a tour that's after the 31st of March, you have to be very mindful that, everything has to be out the door by then. So it will be for things like, pre-buying your flights, equipment hire, etc., etc., etc. Anything that you can prepay is how we do that. Can you apply for more than one artist on the same label at the same time? Was it better to split up applications? I think I mentioned this earlier. You can apply for sort of one or two artists on the same application, but you are better doing it on two applications. That is unless you have a sort of co-headline with two artists which have been, which have been, of a similar status. Ishan, can you not take the questions off so quickly? I wanted to read the last bit of that one, but never mind, mate. Thank you. What if the artist is managing or co-managing the project? Could there be an allocation of budget for them? Oh right, I see who's asking this question, Shadow. Yeah, drop me a line and I'll tell you how to do this. Yeah, it's you just have to make sure that that's put through as a management fee, rather than it being an artist wage. But again, as I mentioned, you can put a management fee on that. If you are self-managed, then obviously, that has to go to has to be basically make sure that it isn't an artist fee. It needs to go through as a management fee. But yeah, I understand why you're asking that, Shadow. I didn't realize it was you asking that, so apologies about that. Ben, we will be seeking support for a territory we have never performed in. How much is strong streaming, factoring the council digital physical merch sales more important? As I mentioned, obviously, the board are looking for traction in that market. If you've never performed in it, they want to see that, strong streaming and, merch and etc sales are good from that. You basically need to be able to prove to this, to the selection board, why they should give you money to do it. And obviously, if you can prove that, through audience data, through streaming data, through, analytics, that, you have really, good levels of engagement with fans in those areas, and yes, they take that into consideration. Obviously, never performed in those. Used to be a little bit of a red flag, not so much now in the in the era of online gigs and direct to fan marketing through social media. So obviously, they want to see there's traction in that market, and obviously streaming numbers, like you suggested there, is a very, very good way of the board making that decision. Can the tour be different states in the same country, USA? Yes, of course. Yeah, yeah. We don't differentiate between states in the same country in the USA. So that's easy answered. Can you apply for touring in multiple territories? Yes, you can. It's not a problem. Obviously, as I mentioned, in the actual thing, what we want to see is that you put, a separate budget line for each territory. So obviously, if you're doing USA, Canada, and Mexico, you put a budget in for each of those. As I say, that's just a throwback to when we may have, a little bit of money left at the end of the day, and the board want to give you some funding. And you say it's 20 each for these three territories. They might have 20 grand available. They'll give you that. But obviously, we want to see that budgets are separated. And as I mentioned earlier, if you want to put in that you have multiple territories. Basically, we want to see that the engagement in each of those territories is as good as each one. So that's how we do that. Can labels submit more than one application? Yes, you can. You can put in two. You are under the rules of the scheme. You are allowed to have two successful applications per applicant per year. Obviously, as we've only got one round this year, that means you can have two successful applications in this round. If you want to put in more than that, what I would suggest is that you speak to, if you're the label, you speak to the management. If you're the management, you speak to the label or whoever. So if you want to put more than one application in, you can put in two. It's not a problem. You can have two successful ones. But obviously, what we want to see is that the person putting the application has all the information readily to hand. But yes, you can certainly put in more than one application. For the revenue stream questions, estimate for the next 2 to 3 years. How many different streams should we consider putting on the application? Is streaming revenue, touring revenue enough? No, you need to put in lots of them. So things like merchandise sales, touring revenue, you've mentioned streaming revenue, merch sales, things like sync licensing, there are brand licensing deals you may do. Are there, other opportunities that are available? Does it open up an advance from, a new publishing deal, a new label deal? Are you likely to receive money, from outside, say direct to fan stuff, etc., etc. We want to see things like, income from performance royalties in there. There's lots and lots of things you can put in there. And obviously, the more information you put in there, the better it is to help your application. The board want to see that, you've really thought about, where any potential revenue is coming from when you look into these applications. Found the match funding. Does the funding from the artist side need to come from the company applying, or for example, can a management company apply match the funding via indie label budget? Right. Okay. Obviously, just to sort of revisit this one, what we ask you to do on the match funding is it's the total cost of the tour or the activity you want funding goes in that section, and the total of that minus any ticket revenue you're allowed to apply for up to 50% of that money. So that's how we get the match funding on it. It basically means that somebody else is putting in the 50%, to cover that. Obviously, we do have a section straight after that question, which is other budget. So say for example, you are a manager and you have a label, and the label has said, well, we're going to give you £10,000 worth of marketing support. You would put that in the section 15, I think it is question 15, rather than the actual budget. But obviously, just for the match funding, it's your total of the activity you'd like to be funded minus any ticket revenue, divided by two. So obviously 50% of that total budget. Can you include fees for external international PRs pluggers or just marketing and promo actual spend? No, you can put in fees for external PRs and pluggers, not a problem. And obviously, we want to see again, we know how much these people cost. We know pretty much most of them actually. They tend to be the same ones appear, application after application. So obviously we want to make sure that your fees for those are in line with what everyone else would expect to say. Can the artist be independent, no label? Yes, of course. And we have a number of self-releasing artists that have been funded. It's not a problem. Obviously, when you put this on your application, you just put it that you are self-releasing artist. And obviously, if you have any teams that are helping you, if you work with, let's say, a label services company or somebody else, then please put that information in there. But of course, yeah, you can be independent, no label. That's not a problem at all. If the minimum payout for the grant is £5,000, does that mean the proposed budget needs to be around the £10,000 mark? Yes, that is completely correct. Yeah. So obviously, your budget needs to be over £10,000 for the 50% of the grant to be equal £5,000. That's completely correct. I'd like the slides, please. Yeah, not a problem. What I'll do is I will send recording of this and the slides out to everyone who's registered today. That's not a problem. So I will send that out as soon as the things download. If the artist received the PPL Momentum from the UK, sorry, excuse me, tongue tied. If the artist has received the PPL Momentum funding for the UK, can they still be eligible for the MEGS? Yes, of course they can. Actually, we see that as a real check mark against an application to see that you've got an artist and a team behind you that the excellent people at PRS Foundation have decided warrants momentum funding. We see a lot of artists that start out with PRS Momentum funding. They may then get PRS Foundation, ISF funded, then they come to MEGS. That's not a problem. And actually, it shows that, you've got a good traction and, that lots of other industry bodies, believe in the artist and you as a manager or label or whoever you are. Yes, so that's not a problem at all. Can I confirm the 50% match funded is after all other income? Right. So it literally is ticket sales only on that. So you don't need to take off any proposed merch or venue fees. It literally is ticket sales. So if you went 25,000 ticket sales, venue fees, and merch, and took us £50,000, you'd have £25,000 in cost left over. You could buy 12.50. Yeah, the maths is right, but obviously you don't take off merch. It's literally is just physical ticket sales that we have to take off in that budget. Is it anticipated ticket sales of tourist events after 31st of March? Yes, that's correct. Yeah, it has to be the anticipated tickets. So if you've got any minimum guarantees on your tour, then you would just take that figure off. Could some of the 50% of the budget not cover MEGS come from other funding? It depends what other funding is. It cannot be any other government funding. So that covers things like PRS International Showcase Fund because the government funds some of that. Also, Arts Council funding, that is government. It comes into the lovely world of de minimis state aid. I won't bore you with the details of that, but essentially, you have if you have been given MEGS funding, you can't use any public money for the rest of it. You can, of course, get things like, label input, management input, profits from, other parts of the company, or, you can put in, money from supporters, etc. It just can't be government funding. That's the only reason you can't put that on. For the USA, they deduct 30% withholding tax on income. So We show that as a cost. Yeah, you can put withholding tax in your budget. That's not a problem to do. And obviously, we make sure that obviously we understand what withholding tax is, because there's certain things that withholding tax covers and things it doesn't. So obviously we do have a finance expert who will look at that. But obviously, yes, you can include that as a cost. Right, I think that. Oh, here we go. Oh, here we go. Blah, 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 blah. Is Help Musicians UK government funding? You need to check with Help Musicians UK. Unfortunately, they will know whether it is. I don't think it is, but the definitive answer will be given from your Help Musicians. So if you have received funding from Help Musicians, you just need to double check with those. Da, 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 da. Right. Rematch funding. Is it a total ticket sales of each show, or the artist fee they receive that is deducted? If a promoter might get gross, but artist fees. It's whatever the artist fee is. So if you know as your artist minimum you're going to get that £3,000 in your example there, then you put the £3,000 in there. So that's what you do, is the ticket sales. It's just what you get back in ticket sales, not the gross in that. Um, could you do a homecoming show in the UK after the shows? You can, but you can't have it funded by MEGS, unfortunately. It has to be for activity outside of the UK. The only funding that we're allowed for the UK is, say, for example, you live in Scotland and you need to travel to London for a visa appointment. We can cover the cost of that, but that's the only UK cost we can cover. Obviously, it is a music export growth scheme, so it has to be for music exports. So, it cannot cover probably 99.9% of things in the UK. But obviously, if you are coming down for, say, a visa appointment, then yes, that's not a problem. We can cover that. But if you've got anything particularly that you're not quite sure of, we'd ask you to sort of double check with us before you put your application in. Right, I think that's about us done. Right, okay. As I mentioned, I will send off a recording for this and the copy of the slides as soon as I download it. Thank you very much. And obviously, in the meantime, if you've got any questions about the scheme that pertain to your application, please just drop me a line and we'll do our best to answer. Obviously, the round closes on Monday. What we would say, is if you've got any questions about the application, please don't wait till about 4 o'clock on Monday to ask us, because we're going to be very busy doing the admin on the scheme. So obviously, if you have any questions, I would start sending them in, now, sooner rather than later. So I just need to say thank you very much for attending, and I wish you all the very best of success with the Music Export Growth Scheme. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.